Louisville, Kentucky, with its rolling hills and southern charm, held many secrets, but perhaps none as profound as those witnessed by Eleanor Jenkins, a 73-year-old woman with kind eyes and hands worn from decades of honest work. For 37 years, Eleanor had been the housekeeper at the sprawling mansion of Muhammad Ali, the boxing legend who had transcended sport to become one of the most recognizable and beloved figures in the world. On a crisp autumn morning, Eleanor sat on her modest porch, a cup of tea warming her weathered hands as she watched the neighborhood children play. Her small home on the outskirts of Louisville was a far cry from the magnificent estate where she had spent most of her working life, but it was filled with memories that money couldn't buy. Eleanor had started working for Ali in 1969, just as his career was facing its greatest challenge. The champion had been stripped of his title for refusing military service, his passport taken, and his boxing license suspended. The world had turned its back on him, but Eleanor had walked through the doors of his home, answering a simple newspaper advertisement, unaware she was about to become witness to history. "I was just 26 then," Eleanor reminisced, her voice soft with the weight of memories. "A single mother with 2 young boys to feed. I didn't know much about boxing, and I certainly didn't understand the politics of what was happening to Mr. Ali at the time. I just needed a job. What started as a temporary position to make ends meet became a lifetime of service. Through Ali's exile from boxing, his triumphant return, the epic battles with Joe Frazier, George Foreman, and his diagnosis with Parkinson's disease, Eleanor was there, quietly maintaining the household while history unfolded around her. If this story has made you feel something already, however small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from and subscribe to the channel. People think they knew him because they saw him in the ring or on television," Eleanor said, shaking her head slightly. "But the man I knew behind closed doors was something else entirely, something the cameras never captured." Eleanor had witnessed the most intimate moments of Ali's life, the quiet mornings when the bombastic public persona fell away and he sat in contemplative silence, the nights when pain from his brutal fights kept him awake, the private conversations with figures who shaped the 20th century, and the tender moments with his children that revealed the gentle heart behind the powerful fists. But there was something else Eleanor had seen over those decades, something she had kept to herself for all these years, something that would change how the world remembered the man known as the greatest. "For the longest time, I thought it wasn't my story to tell," Eleanor said, her eyes gazing toward the horizon. "But now that he's gone, and as I feel my own years catching up with me, I believe people should know the truth about Muhammad Ali. Not just the truth they think they know from documentaries and books, but the real truth. The things I saw with my own eyes when nobody else was watching." As Eleanor finished her tea, she made a decision. After decades of silence, it was time to reveal what really happened behind the walls of Ali's mansion. The secrets, the struggles, and the profound acts that never made headlines but defined the man far more than his achievements in the boxing ring ever could. "The world thinks they knew Muhammad Ali," Eleanor said, standing up from her porch chair with determination in her eyes. "But they have no idea what I witnessed over those 37 years, no idea at all." The first time Eleanor walked through the ornate front doors of Ali's mansion in 1969, she was intimidated by the grandeur. Marble floors stretched before her, crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and the walls were adorned with artwork that cost more than she would earn in a decade. "I remember thinking I didn't belong there," Eleanor recalled, smoothing the fabric of her dress as she spoke. "I grew up poor in West Louisville. My daddy worked at the tobacco warehouse until his back gave out, and my mama cleaned houses just like I ended up doing. Places like that mansion weren't meant for people like me, except to clean them." Ali was at a low point in his life when Eleanor started working for him. Banned from boxing in the prime of his career, his income severely diminished, and his public image transformed from beloved champion to controversial figure, all because he refused to step forward when his name was called at the draft induction ceremony. His famous words, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," had made him a pariah to many Americans. "He was quieter than I expected," Eleanor said of their first meeting. The television showed this loud, boastful man, always declaring he was the greatest. But that morning, he just nodded at me and said, "The kitchen needs the most help, Miss Jenkins." Then he went back to reading his newspaper. Over the coming weeks, Eleanor learned the rhythms of the household. She arrived each morning at 7, prepared breakfast for Ali and any guests staying at the mansion, cleaned the 17 rooms, did the laundry, and sometimes prepared lunch before leaving at 4 in the afternoon. But it was what happened on her third week that gave Eleanor the first glimpse into the private Ali, the man behind the public persona. "I was dusting in his study when I heard crying," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if she was still trying to protect his privacy after all these years. Not just sniffling, but deep, heartbreaking sobs. "I thought maybe I should leave, give him privacy, but something made me stay." Through the partially open door, Eleanor saw Ali, the man who proclaimed himself the greatest, who had stood toe-to-toe with Sonny Liston without flinching, hunched over his desk, tears streaming down his face as he read letters from ordinary Americans. Some were hate mail, calling him terrible names, threatening his life, telling him to leave the country. But others were letters of support from fellow conscientious objectors, from civil rights activists, from religious leaders who respected his stance as a Muslim, and from soldiers in Vietnam who understood his position. He was reading every single one, Eleanor said, not skimming them, not having an assistant sort through them. He was reading the words of both people who despised him and people who loved him, and he was feeling every word deeply. When Ali finally noticed Eleanor standing there, he didn't try to hide his tears or dismiss her. Instead, he said something she would never forget. "They either think I'm a hero or a traitor, Miss Jenkins. Ain't nobody seeing me as just a man trying to live by his beliefs." It was the first of many private moments Eleanor would witness that revealed the true character of the man born Cassius Clay, the vulnerability behind the bravado, the doubt behind the declarations of greatness, the human being behind the icon. But there was something even more surprising that Eleanor discovered during those early years, something that contradicted the public's perception of Ali so dramatically that she had kept it to herself for decades. "Everyone thought Mr. Ali lived like a king," Eleanor said, leaning forward as if about to share a secret. "And yes, the house was magnificent. But what people don't know is what he was doing with most of his money, even when he hardly had any." Coming in during his exile from boxing, Eleanor paused, collecting her thoughts as the weight of the revelation she was about to share settled on her shoulders. "Every month, without fail, Mr. Ali would have me prepare dozens of packages, small boxes containing cash. Not large amounts, mind you, but enough to make a difference to a struggling family. He kept a list of names and addresses in a leather-bound book that he updated himself. Names of widows whose husbands had died in the ring, old boxers who had fallen on hard times, families in Louisville who were facing eviction or couldn't afford medical care for their children." Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears as she continued. "He made me promise never to tell anyone. He said, 'Miss Jenkins, the Prophet Muhammad taught that charity is best when given with the right hand so secretly that the left hand doesn't know what it's doing.'" I watched him pack those boxes himself, include handwritten notes of encouragement, and arrange for them to be delivered without any indication of where they came from. This secret philanthropy continued throughout Ali's career, even as his wealth grew after his return to boxing. The number of recipients expanded, But the principle remained the same: giving without recognition, helping without headlines. "That's the first thing people should know about the real Muhammad Ali," Eleanor said firmly. Long before his Parkinson's diagnosis made his charity work more public, long before the foundations and organizations bearing his name, he was quietly taking care of people who would never know their benefactor was the most famous athlete in the world. But this was just the beginning of what Eleanor had witnessed inside the walls of Ali's mansion. The truly shocking revelations, the ones that would forever change how history remembered the greatest, were still to come. As Ali's career progressed through the 1970s, his home became a crossroads for some of the most influential figures of the era. Politicians, civil rights leaders, fellow athletes, Hollywood stars and musicians all passed through the doors that Eleanor polished each morning. She served them coffee, prepared their meals, and faded into the background as history unfolded in conversations around dining tables and in the plush sitting rooms of the mansion. People would be amazed at who came to see Mr. Ali, Eleanor said, counting on her fingers as she recalled the visitors. Malcolm X before their falling out, Martin Luther King Jr., President Ford, Senator Kennedy, Frank Sinatra, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson when he was just a child star. They all came, some publicly, others in secret. But it wasn't just the famous visitors that made these years remarkable to Eleanor. It was watching Ali navigate the height of his fame and success while privately battling challenges few knew about. After the Thriller in Manila fight with Joe Frazier in 1975, Mr. Ali could barely walk for weeks, Eleanor revealed. The public saw him giving interviews, looking strong, still talking big. But I saw him each morning, struggling to get out of bed, wincing in pain with every movement. His personal physician came daily, administering treatments and medications that gave him just enough relief to maintain his public appearances. Eleanor paused, her eyes growing distant as she recalled one particular morning. I found him in the bathroom, unable to lift his arms high enough to brush his own teeth, the greatest boxer in the world, the man who seemed invincible to everyone else, couldn't perform this simple task. I helped him without saying a word about it. His dignity meant everything to him. These physical struggles were just the beginning. As the years progressed, Eleanor noticed subtle changes in Ali. Occasional slurring of words, a slight tremor in his hands, moments of uncharacteristic stillness. Years before his official Parkinson's diagnosis in 1984, Ali was already feeling the effects of the disease that would eventually silence his famous voice. He knew something was wrong long before he told anyone, Eleanor said softly. I'd catch him staring at his hands when they trembled, a look of fear crossing his face, but then he'd see me watching and immediately start joking, "Still faster than lightning, Miss Jenkins. Still the prettiest and the greatest." Yet through these personal struggles, Eleanor witnessed something that few outside Ali's intimate circle ever saw: his extraordinary capacity for compassion, even toward those who had been his bitter enemies. Day in 1978, I was preparing the guest room because Mr. Ali said someone special was coming to stay, Eleanor recalled. He was unusually quiet that morning, almost nervous. When I asked who was coming, he just said, "Someone who needs our help, Miss Jenkins." The guest turned out to be an aging white boxer who had once been a vocal critic of Ali during his exile from the sport. The man had fallen on hard times, broke, suffering from pugilistic dementia, and recently evicted from his apartment. When no one else would help him, he had swallowed his pride and reached out to Ali, the man he had once publicly denounced as un-American. Mr. Ali welcomed him like a brother, Eleanor said, her voice filled with wonder even decades later. He gave him the best guest room, arranged for medical care, and spent evenings sitting with him, looking through old boxing magazines and reminiscing about fights. I overheard the man apologizing for the things he'd said years before. And Mr. Ali just put his hand on his shoulder and said, "That's all past now. We're just two old fighters helping each other home." The boxer stayed for 6 months until Ali had arranged permanent housing and ongoing care for him. Before he left, Ali gave him enough money to live comfortably for years, all on the condition that he tell no one where the help had come from. "That's how it always was," Eleanor explained. "His generosity came with just one requirement: silence. No publicity, no public gratitude, no mentions in the press, just quiet help when it was needed most." But perhaps the most surprising thing Eleanor witnessed during her decades of service was Ali's relationship with his spiritual life, a side of him that even many of his biographers have failed to fully capture. "People know he was Muslim, of course," Eleanor said, "but they don't know how deeply he practiced his faith when no one was watching. 5 times a day, without fail, he would stop whatever he was doing for prayer. Sometimes in the middle of meetings with important people, he'd excuse himself, perform his ablutions, and pray. I've seen powerful executives sitting awkwardly in his study, checking their watches while Ali was on his prayer rug in the next room, completely at peace." Eleanor, a devout Baptist herself, found this commitment to faith moving, even though it was different from her own religious practice. "He never tried to convert me or anyone else in the household staff, but he would sometimes share wisdom from the Quran that was so similar to the Bible teachings I knew. He'd say, 'Miss Jenkins, all these paths lead to the same home if we follow them with a pure heart.'" As the 1980s progressed and Ali's Parkinson's symptoms became more pronounced, Eleanor's role in the household evolved. She became not just a housekeeper, but a steadying presence, someone who understood his needs without him having to voice them, who could interpret his increasingly difficult speech when others couldn't. By 1986, some visitors would leave frustrated because they couldn't understand what he was saying, Eleanor explained. But I could. We'd developed a kind of language between us over the years. I knew what he meant from just a few words or a gesture. It was during this period that Eleanor discovered something in Ali's private study, something that would shock her and eventually change how she viewed the man she had worked for all these years. A discovery so significant that she had questioned whether to ever share it with the world. "I was cleaning his desk one afternoon when he was away at a medical appointment," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "A drawer that was usually locked had been left open. I wasn't snooping, that wasn't my way, but I saw my name on a document and couldn't help but look closer. What Eleanor found was a leather portfolio containing legal papers, Ali's last will and testament, updated just months before, and there, listed among the beneficiaries along with his children and other family members, was Eleanor Jenkins. "He had set up a trust fund for me," she said, tears welling in her eyes at the memory. "Enough money to ensure I would never have to work again after he was gone, that my boys would be able to finish college, that I'd have a home of my own, all this for a housekeeper." The note attached simply said, "For Miss Jenkins, who has seen me at my worst and my best, and treated me the same either way." But this discovery, touching as it was, paled in comparison to what Eleanor would witness in the final decade of Ali's life, events so remarkable that they would forever alter the legacy of the greatest if they ever became known. The 1990s brought profound changes to Ali's life. His physical condition deteriorated as Parkinson's tightened its grip, robbing him of his famous eloquence and much of his mobility. The mansion that had once hosted legendary parties and gatherings of the powerful became quieter, more focused. On Ali's medical care and comfort, Eleanor, now in her 50s, remained a constant. As other staff came and went, she stayed, her role evolving beyond housekeeper to become something like family. She was there when Ali lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta in 1996, his arm trembling visibly, a moment that brought the world to tears. "He practiced for weeks before that ceremony," Eleanor revealed, each day holding up a weighted pole in the backyard, training for that moment like it was another championship fight. His doctors advised against it, said it would be too strenuous. But he told them, "This ain't about me, it's about showing that someone with Parkinson's can still contribute, still be part of the world." As the new millennium arrived, Eleanor began to notice unusual visitors to the mansion, people who arrived without appointment and were immediately welcomed into Ali's private study. These weren't celebrities or dignitaries, but ordinary-looking men and women who often arrived looking tense and left appearing relieved. "At first, I didn't understand what was happening," Eleanor admitted. "These people would come, sometimes late at night, and Mr. Ali would insist on seeing them no matter how tired he was. They'd stay for an hour or two and then leave. No explanation was ever given to the household staff." It was in 2003 that Eleanor accidentally discovered the purpose of these mysterious meetings. She had stayed late to prepare the house for a family gathering the next day and was bringing fresh towels to the guest bathrooms when she overheard a conversation from Ali's partially open study door. The man was saying, "I don't know how to." "Thank you. My daughter can have the operation now. You've saved her life," Eleanor recalled. And Mr. Ali, his voice very difficult to understand by then, said something like, "No thanks needed. Allah provides, I'm just the delivery man." As the visitor left, Eleanor ducked into an alcove to avoid being seen. When she peeked out, she saw the man embracing Ali, and then Ali handing him what looked like an envelope. Over the following months, Eleanor pieced together the truth through overheard conversations, glimpses of documents, and finally a direct explanation from Ali himself when he caught her witnessing one of these exchanges. He was using much of his fortune to help people in medical crises, people who had been denied insurance coverage, who couldn't afford life-saving treatments, who had nowhere else to turn, Eleanor explained, her voice filled with awe even years later. Mostly people he had never met before. They were referred to him through a network of doctors and community leaders who knew of his private charity. This revelation stunned Eleanor. Despite decades of witnessing Ali's generosity, the scale of this operation was beyond anything she had imagined. Millions of dollars were flowing through the mansion to people in desperate situations, all distributed without publicity, tax write-offs, or public recognition. When he realized I had figured it out, he asked me to come to his study, Eleanor said. His speech was very difficult by then, but he made his wishes clear. "This stays between us, Miss Jenkins. No papers, no TV, no books. This is between me and God." Eleanor honored that request throughout the remainder of Ali's life, but now, years after his passing, she felt the world should know this side of him. "People remember the boxing, the poetry, the political stands he took," she said. "But they don't know that in his final decades, when the cameras were gone and the spotlight had moved on, Muhammad Ali was saving lives from the shadows. Hundreds of lives, maybe more. As Ali's health declined further in his final years, these charitable activities became more structured, with trusted advisors helping to manage the distributions. But the principle remained the same: no publicity, no recognition, just quiet help for those in desperate need. He told me once, very slowly, each word a struggle, "Miss Jenkins, wealth is like the ocean. You can't drink it all yourself. You have to let it flow through you to others, or it becomes poison," Eleanor recalled, her eyes distant with memory. In his final months, as Ali's condition worsened, Eleanor was one of the few non-family members allowed to visit him in the hospital. During one of these visits, he managed to communicate one last message to her. He could barely speak by then, Eleanor said, wiping away a tear. But he took my hand and whispered, "Tell them." I leaned closer to hear him better. "Tell them I tried to love everyone." Those were the last words he ever said to me. Muhammad Ali passed away on June 3, 2016. Eleanor attended the funeral, sitting quietly among the thousands who came to pay their respects to the greatest. World leaders, sports legends, and celebrities delivered moving eulogies. But Eleanor knew they were describing a version of Ali that was incomplete. They spoke of his athletic prowess, his cultural impact, his defiance of convention. But none of them mentioned the man Eleanor had known, the one who secretly packed boxes of cash for struggling families, who welcomed former enemies into his home when they had nowhere else to go, who funneled millions to save the lives of strangers, while asking for nothing in return. After the funeral, as specified in his will, Eleanor received the trust fund Ali had established for her. It allowed her to retire comfortably, to help her sons and grandchildren, to live without financial worry for the first time in her life. The money was a blessing, of course, Eleanor acknowledged, but the real gift was those 37 years, watching a truly great man live his values when no one was looking. That's what I want people to know about Muhammad Ali, not just that he was the greatest in the ring, but that he was even greater outside it, in ways the world never saw. As our conversation drew to a close, Eleanor Jenkins stood on her porch, gazing out at the street where children played, unaware of the extraordinary history this unassuming woman had witnessed. The sun was setting over Louisville, casting long shadows across the neighborhood Ali had never forgotten, despite his global fame. Muhammad Ali once told me that we all have two lives, Eleanor said, her voice soft but clear. The one we show, the world, and the one we live when no one is watching. He said the second one is the only one that matters in the end. She smiled, a full, radiant smile that seemed to lighten the years from her face. And now you know what I saw when no one else was watching, the true story of the greatest. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.